All right, it's another Mailbag Monday here on the Athletic Football Show. I have about 10 or so questions we're going to try to get through today. The first one is from Moose. It says, June 1st is just around the corner. The hypothetical A.J. Brown trade is the big thing to keep an eye on. But what other trades or cuts is the league watching for? What names are on your short list here?
I don't think there's that many. I don't feel like Brandon Ayuk is obviously, I think, the name that is probably going to be biggest that people are looking for. I think there are a couple of those younger quarterbacks that are like either, trade candidates or have clearly been pushed out of their starting role. Anthony Richardson, Spencer Rattler, but I feel like we've already given those a lot of air. Keon Coleman is maybe still on the board for some teams if the Bills are kind of done with that and Joe Brady wants to kind of be in a different era as he takes things over, but I didn't have that many like newer interesting names that we haven't already talked about.
Two I would throw out there. We actually mentioned him earlier this month when we were talking about the Jags, just in terms of how weird their offensive line resource allocation was. Walker Little, I'd throw out there just of a team like, all right, we need just a playable guy at tackle. And at this point, he's a very expensive swing tackle potentially for the Jags. And the other one I'd throw out, last year of his contract, obviously this team, a lot of urgency right now. And so I think this would be something that happened maybe deeper into the season, maybe around the trade deadline. Daron Payne is another one I would throw out there. He's in the final year of his deal. And so let's just say Washington's season is middling, forgettable. They get to the midway point. They don't have playoff aspirations. Is it worth getting something for him right now? So those are the two that I had other than Anthony Richardson.
That's an interesting one because Walker Little is like, you do that because you need a Band-Aid, kind of like how, Cam Robinson got traded for a year or two ago. Like that feels more like that's what that is. Daron Payne, I do think at his best, like is a difference maker for you. And so if there's a team around week 5 or 6, like that could make sense.
Yeah. Right now, I think that Washington needs to win.
I
think
totally.
that for them
but
right
if they're
now,
2 and 4,
if they're 2 and 4, I think that's the moment where maybe the line of thinking starts to become a little bit different. Next one here from Ruben Clay. Is there anyone that might be this year's John Harbaugh, a coach, GM, quarterback who seems an average standing to even good standing that could be fired or on a different team by the end of the season?
I think the two coaches that I would probably put here are both in the NFC North, and I think that is not a coincidence. I think Matt LaFleur and Kevin O'Connell are both, like, there's a chance that I think we both think that they are good at their job, but I think Matt LaFleur, the heat got turned up a little bit last year, and obviously he was able to keep the job. And then Kevin O'Connell's just in a weird spot with where the roster is, having to change over quarterbacks and all that stuff. And so to me, it's not just that dynamic of that with them. It's that the NFC North is such a bloodbath that one of these teams is probably bound to win 8 games and be a 4th place team. Not necessarily the Packers or the Vikings, but like someone in that division will have that fate. And there's a decent chance that it's the Packers with some of the step backs that they've taken. Maybe maybe defensive regression comes for the Vikings a little bit, and Kyler Murray isn't as good as they want, and they only win 8 games, and they kind of have that fate. And so I would say those two guys, and they're in a similar situation to me where like Mike McDaniel was, where I still think that he would be getting head coaching interviews and like he would still be a hot candidate. Maybe takes a year or two to be an offensive play caller before being a head coach again.
Two things with that. One, Matt LaFleur just got a contract extension. Just got one.
Yeah.
And so that to me feels like we're probably in a spot where they're not going to want to pay him and a new coach after just giving him that contract extension. It happens, right? But I just can't imagine the Packers are in a spot where they would want to do that. I think he probably gets another year unless this is like a total disaster. With O'Connell, I agree that it's an inflection point for the organization, but my read on it and just my assumption is that with the current setup, the fact that he's entrenched and they're about to hire a new GM, I think he's probably consolidated more power there than he's lost, even if the team is at this kind of like strange inflection point. So for both of those, I think there might be like outside dynamics not related to the wins and losses or the product on the field that would insulate each of them from like a true downturn, no matter how this season goes.
I think that is because of the contract extension, probably more true of LaFleur. O'Connell, I think there is a world where things just don't look very good for that team. And I think I'm more open to that.
But how bad would it have to look for him to get fired?
6 wins and like the 20th best offense in the league. I think like that. And I don't think that that's like off the table for that team. I think they'll probably be better than that. But like there's a chance that because the NFC North is a bloodbath, one team just gets the short end of the stick.
I actually like this. I don't think it'll happen.
No,
but
neither do I. But like,
I think
if you
playing
have to,
out that
yeah.
hypothetical and just thinking about what it would mean, especially on the heels of last year, where so now we have 2 years in a row where he is not this guy who can just kind of like wave the magic wand and fix everything. Now, what does that conversation look like? I like that. I actually think that's good. We play it out a step further, right? The entire narrative around Sam Darnold and how this was the only scenario where Sam Darnold could get fixed. And then you watch Sam Darnold win a Super Bowl the following year. So does that maybe retcon that season on top of what this year and last year looked like? All right, I can get there. I think it's still like a remote possibility, but I think that's a good one.
It is. Yeah, this is not the timeline that I am betting on happening. But again, if we're picking a coach that we do think highly of and are having to try to find where is that scenario where things fall out, like I know that like people were getting frustrated with the Harbaugh era going into this year, but I think most people thought that that Ravens team was going to win 12 games and be like one of the best teams in the NFL again. Like we didn't foresee it going the way it did. And so again, if I'm having to pick a team and a coach that I do think are good and can be good, but you can see how things would fall out a little bit, that's probably the one where I'm landing.
There are a couple really spicy ones where it's like, and I don't have a good reason for believing this, but can I concoct a scenario in my mind where we're having like a difficult conversation by the end of the season?
Who do you got?
What if Davis Webb is just like a killer play caller for the Broncos? And we get to the end of the year and people are kind of like, you know what? Like Sean Payton's rubbing people the wrong way. Like it just.
So that's the only reason I can buy that. It's because the vibes sometimes are kind of weird there.
That's one where, again, that's like, I don't expect that to happen. But if I'm throwing out just like random names and being wildly irresponsible, that might be one I would say. For quarterbacks, the 2 guys I would say that I think at times over the last couple of years, their stars have shined pretty brightly. I could come up with a scenario where both of them are on new teams next year, Baker Mayfield and Jalen Hurts.
Yeah, I think Jalen Hurts is the easy one. And then Baker Mayfield, I think, is absolutely up there. I think that there are a couple that are more stretches, like things would really have to go south. Like, again, this is not a world that I would bet on, but like if things just go horribly, horribly wrong for the Lions and they feel like they can reset, I don't think that would happen, but like it's happened to him before. But I think the easiest that you would probably bet on are Hurts and Mayfield.
The Lions could easily trade Jared Goff next year if they wanted to. If they traded him before June 1, it'd be $30 million in dead money. He has a $63 million cap hit. They would save $33 million.
Yeah.
Not that bad. They'd save $30 million if they traded Jared Goff. Whether another team would want to take on oh man, that's actually a good one. There's no way this would ever happen. Let's just say in this hypothetical, Jared Goff, like people didn't like him and he was not part of like an all-time turnaround for a franchise. Like it was just like purely on like a football level. If the offense was disappointing enough, Jared Goff would be an interesting one because I do think there would be teams that would trade for $40 million of Jared Goff if they were in a tight spot. I absolutely think that would happen.
100%.
But there's no way the Lions would ever trade him. And I don't think they should. Like I think for
I don't either.
Interpersonal reasons and where they are in their team build, all of that stuff, I don't think they should. But that's one that at least, like, again, $63 million cap hit. He's going to be 33 years old in 2027. They can save $30 million if they did it. That one is at least worth throwing out there. But I can't ever imagine a scenario or what that scenario would look like where the Lions would be willing to move on from him. Again, just because he's beloved there. Like he is such a central figure in like what they're doing. All right. Jason says, you get to make a modern defense from scratch, but you still have to abide by all the constraints of team building. In your ideal defense, what position does your slot player play when you're not in nickel? Is he off the field? Is he a safety like Kyle Hamilton? Does he bump inside like Cooper DeJean? Or does he play a little bit more in the box like Nicky Manwari? What is your answer to this?
So I'm tempted to say safety like Kyle Hamilton because I do think when you're in base, being able to do whatever you want with your safeties, I do think that there's a lot of value in that. I think I ultimately ended up with the bump outside like Cooper DeJean and Devin Witherspoon. And the reason being is that Safeties in general, and this is not obviously true, there are a lot of safeties who are dog shit tacklers. In general, I trust them to be a little bit better tacklers and be more physical and all that stuff. I don't always trust outside corners to be that. And so if I can guarantee that my guy who is like a dog at the nickel and then is going to be pushed outside and he's giving me a lot of good tackling and stuff on the outside, I kind of like that. Maybe I'm just colored by like, I just love the way that Devin Witherspoon plays, but I think I might lean there.
Took this in a slightly different direction in that my thought was, in an ideal scenario, where would that player be very good at two positions, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like if I like Cooper DeJean specifically, like Cooper DeJean can play outside. He is not a high level outside corner. I think it is most likely in all three of these that are presented that you can have a high level player in two different spots if your safety is walking down and playing nickel when you're in nickel. Does that make sense?
I think that does make sense, but like I think that is getting like very specific to these players, if that makes sense. Like I actually think Devin Witherspoon is like a very, very good outside cornerback. Not as good as Kyle Hamilton is good as both of those spots.
That's kind of what I mean, though. I think it's the path is easiest for me to imagine for a player being an elite nickel and an elite safety. I don't think an elite nickel can be an elite linebacker or is likely going to be an elite outside corner. But at safety, I think you can do both.
Because nickel and safety is a little bit more analogous to each other. And like the overlap in what you're just asked to do on a given play is a little bit more. So you know what? I think that actually probably is the answer.
Yeah, my instinct was safety. And I think, yeah, like linebacker, like you're getting by. Outside corner, you're getting by. Like for the most part. At safety, I don't think you have to get by. And so if we're, again, building it from scratch, I think that's where I sit with it.
Yeah, I think that probably is the answer.
All right, this next question is completely unhinged, and I did answer it, but I'm not sure if you did, but we're going to do it anyway. Natan Gorin says, in a hypothetical world, if all 22 starting players on your team had to be a different age, how would you split it up? So the ages that we're doing here are ages 20 through 41, right? That's 22 players. That's the only like realistic stretch you would have. So I started backwards because my thought was, where would you want the 41 and 40-year-old players?
Like a quarterback, I guess, but like here's the thing.
It's too old. It's too old for quarterback.
People are gonna say quarterback because like, oh, Brady did it and Favre did. That's like two people in the history of the NFL. Like it's ridiculous.
Terrible way of thinking about it.
I think like D-line is probably the answer.
Interior defensive lineman was my 41-year-old player.
Yes.
That's like you could get by, right?
Yes.
Like Calais Campbell 2 years from now, you could get by with that sort of player. So my 41-year-old player was an interior defensive lineman. 39 and 41 were interior defensive linemen, both of them. It's just like those are the guys that have to move the least. Like if I have big body players, I can just stick them there, and especially in the modern NFL where we're really just trying to eat up and destroy blocks. Like just give me two big old boys and stick them in the middle of my defensive line. I had a 40-year-old center. Like I think in theory you could get by with a 40-year-old center. You could live with that. 38 was my quarterback.
That probably is bumping on the line of like, they're not too old yet. I think that probably is the answer.
And we could swap a few of these around. Like I had guard at 37. So if you wanted the quarterback to be there, but I think that to me is like an important cutoff is like after age 35. I think you could get by with one edge who's like 36.
Oh, definitely. I think you want one who's like younger, 25 years old or whatever it is. I don't know exactly what number you put. And then one just like, you're Zadarius Smith, who's like 35, 36 years old.
I had a 36-year-old edge and a 21-year-old edge.
That
was the two that I had. One 36-year-old, one 21-year-old. 34-year-old, I had a 35-year-old corner. I think you can get by with one corner who is just like, I've seen a million things. We're playing a ton of zone.
So how old are your safeties?
34 and 30.
Okay.
If you want to make the corner 34 and the safety 35, that's acceptable.
But it's the same. It's kind of the same.
I think you can get by with one DB each. That's a little bit of an older player. I had my linebackers as 32 and 33 because I don't think you want the linebackers to be too old, but they also don't want to be too young because that position takes a while to develop. So I think two linebackers in their early 30s was a good way to do it.
I think I agree, but I think there are fewer guys who can run at 32 and 33 at that position than we probably think. I don't think that there's that many of them.
Who would you put at 32 and 33 then? Because I don't think you want your offensive tackle. Maybe offensive tackle.
How old is your oldest receiver? Yeah, offensive tackle is a good one. How old is your oldest receiver?
27.
Oh, I'd want my oldest receiver older than that. I think you can get by with like 130-year-old, 31-year-old. And he doesn't have to be our star. I want one of my receivers to be like 20.
The cliff comes fast for the receivers.
But I would rather have that be my wide receiver 3 than my like every down linebacker, I think.
How old is Demario Davis?
Guy he's the only guy.
He's 37.
He's the cheat code.
I'd be curious to go back and look at how many productive 33-year-old linebackers there are. Because I think sometimes we're thinking about the old guys. Like Levante David was 35 last year. So if we're going 3 years further back, I think there are more guys that can survive.
33 was probably his last good year. I think survive, but I guess I'm trying to think of like the average player at that age. But I guess most guys at most positions just don't last till 35, 36.
All right, so what if we did this? What if one of my – but see, I don't know if there's any other good answers because I don't want both corners to be old. My second corner is 28, which I think is right.
That's fine.
I had a 29-year-old tight end. I don't think I want a tight end that's 33 years old. And I don't know if I want tackles that are that old.
I think depending on how the receiver core is shaped out, I think you could kind of just take a tight end who's a little bit older. He's our check down guy. He's just old, reliable, and we can get by here, depending on how the receiving core and running back shapes out.
See, I think I want to be right in like the heart of the development curve at tight end, like 28, 29, like second contract, first year. Like
you're trying to maximize these skill players with the 27-year-old oldest, and I think that's fair. I don't know.
Would you rather have a 32-year-old receiver or a 32-year-old off-ball linebacker?
Well, it depends. Are they my number one receiver or are they my starting linebacker? I think it depends.
All right. Okay. All right. I guess that's fair. Okay. Let's make one of the linebackers 27 and we'll make one of the receivers 31.
I think that's fair. Yeah.
And then one of the offensive tackles, the offensive tackle will be 2 years old. The offensive tackle will be 32. I think that's good. The 31 is my oldest receiver. There's plenty of 31-year-old receivers that make it
who can just give you 600 yards. Like this
plenty.
Doesn't have to. Yeah,
that age cliff at 30 worries me, but 31 I think we can get by with. My second offensive tackle was 26. I had receivers that were 24 and 25. I had one very young guard. I didn't know where to. I didn't want the receivers to be super young.
I didn't want be like babies. Yeah, that makes sense.
My second corner is 28. Like I don't want a rookie corner.
Mm-hmm.
That's one. I had a 22-year-old nickel because it's a very specific position, right? Like if I could just drop Nick Imanwari in there and that's all he does, I can get by there. And then my running back was 20.
That probably is the spot. Man, I'm trying to think.
I'm just thinking like if you had an edge rusher that was just like a demon and it was 21 and you're just like, I'm just letting you loose, buddy. Like you can live with that. I think you can live with 100%. Like just a pure juice guy as a 21-year-old player. That guard that 23-year-old guard, I'm sure there's a way to actually maximize that.
No, like maybe that's fine. Yeah, I think the 23-year-old guard is fine.
You think the corners could be younger?
I think if you flip the guard in the 28-year-old corner, maybe that is the answer.
That probably makes more sense.
Yeah, that might be the answer.
Let's make
because 28 too with corners is like the cliff can come for those guys pretty fast. True. Like 27,
for me,
28.
I just wanted somebody that wasn't super green. Like I didn't want somebody that was super young and raw. But if one of my other corners is going to be 25, having somebody with some giddy up at that other spot that can really run and is 23, that's probably the right answer. So we'll put the second guard as 28. All right. So 20-year-old running back, 21-year-old edge rusher, 22-year-old nickel, 23-year-old corner, 24 and 25-year-old receivers, 26-year-old offensive tackle, 27-year-old linebacker, 28-year-old guard, 29-year-old tight end, 30-year-old safety, 31-year-old wide receiver, 32 offensive tackle, 33 linebacker, 34 safety, 34 corner, 36 edge, 37 guard, 38 quarterback, 39 and 41 interior defensive lineman, 40-year-old center. I think that's right. We solved it.
I think that's as good as we're going to get. Yeah, I actually think that that's pretty damn good.
I spent a lot of time on this.
See, I figured that was going to take a lot of time, and I was like, I'll just let him figure this out, and I'll see if I can like pull him in a couple different directions.
It's just like I was actually on the train going out to the burbs to get my car at the body shop. I had my tires replaced, and so I was like I was on the train, and I looked at this question. I was like, oh, it's a pretty in-depth question, and then I started thinking about it for like 30 seconds, and I'm like, I'm into it now.
What else am I going to do for an hour on the train? Yeah,
now I'm into it. So no, that one sucked me in for sure. All right, next one here. Seth says, on a recent episode, Derek mentioned the value of having a player who's a C+ at multiple positions. It got me thinking, who is the best true utility player in the league right now? I'm talking about the guys who are good at multiple positions, but elite nowhere. The DB who can slide between safety and nickel, the wide receiver who can play XZ and slot without a drop-off, even if they aren't a Pro Bowler at any of them. I had two guys that I landed on here, one offense, one defense. Who were your answers?
Yeah, I had a few. I think if we're doing receiver, I think the answer is Jakobi Meyers.
It's good.
Yep.
It's my exact answer.
Can play him anywhere, and he could probably get you 1,000 yards. And it's not going to be 1,600 yards, but he can give you 1,000 yards just about anywhere.
That was my offensive answer, was Jakobi Meyers.
Who did you have for defense then?
Quentin Lake.
Quentin Lake is a good one. See, I think the answer almost has to be a DB, where it's a guy who can play a little
What
bit
else
of
would it be? Like,
right,
because
the closest I got was
on passing downs is like, that's not a real utility player. You're not really playing two different positions.
The closest I got was like Andrew Van Ginkel, where it's like he's an edge player, but they use him in so many different ways, and like he can be off the ball. Leo Chenal is a little bit of that too. Like some of those guys.
Good ones. Those are good ones. The linebackers that play off ball and on the line of scrimmage for real. Those are definitely good answers. I like both of those.
And then the DB I had actually was Coby Bryant. Because I think can do a little bit of everything. I do think he's probably too good, but he was a corner in college too. So I do think like in emergency snaps, he could just play outside corner for you. So that was probably my guess, but I would say he's maybe too good.
I think, limiting it to like 2-ish positions is probably right. And so Quentin Lake, I think he can easily play. I mean, he played nickel for most of last year. He was their nickel, but he's played plenty of safety and can play safety. And then Jakobi Meyers is truly one of those guys that can play all three. I mean, you look at the split of his snaps even from last year, it's very evenly split. Like he plays plenty in the slot and is more than viable outside. And so I think the fact that both of us landed on Jakobi Meyers, I think is very telling.
He's just the easy one because it's like, he's not the only player that I think you can be like XYZ and he's the best. Like I think Devontae Smith can do this, but also Devontae Smith is like knocking on the door of all pros if he wants to. Like Jakobi Meyers is not quite that level of player. He truly is like the perfect utility guy.
Next one here from Luke Krigscheld. He said, when you guys were talking about the dearth of linebackers when ranking divisional position groups on May 11th, it made me think about watching middle linebackers like Urlacher, Ray Lewis, etc. Yes, I was born in 1990. And I wonder where guys like that or with that body type would play now. Do they flip to tight end in high school and college or fill out and play edge? What do we make of this? Where would Ray Lewis and Brian Urlacher play right now?
So Urlacher was a converted safety and then just got bigger, which actually is funny that we just had this with Sonny Styles, who did the same thing. So maybe they're having a little bit of a comeback. Ray Lewis, I think specifically, is a little bit different. Ray Lewis was 6'1". What the hell else was he going to play? You know,
so I think for both of them, my answer is why can't they just play linebacker?
Right. And so I think that's great because I think the real answer is not necessarily that guys are playing different positions now. Maybe some of them are, like the 6'4" guys are just playing more edge than they used to or more tight end. I just think that now a lot of these guys are just not as heavy as they used to be. Like Brian Urlacher was probably playing at 255 or whatever it is. I think now it wouldn't be more than 245 probably. And same thing for Ray Lewis. Like he would probably just be, they would ask him to probably be 10 pounds lighter than whatever he was playing at the time, because I think just the box constraints were a little bit different. The sport was different. Even how the college game was operating and what those guys were asked to be from a young age, I think was different. And so that to me is, I think what it is it's not necessarily that these guys are playing different positions on the field. It's just that the position of linebacker is different than it was 20 years ago.
Yeah, I think everyone would be a little bit smaller. But at the same time, like you just said, Brian Urlacher was a converted safety. Like just because Brian Urlacher weighed 255 the Bears played like a ton of Tampa 2 early in Brian Urlacher's career. He was the pole runner in Tampa 2 at 255 pounds. Like Brian Urlacher really didn't have any problems, but Brian Urlacher's limitations as a player weren't that he couldn't move. Brian Urlacher ran 4.59 at 258 pounds.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Like these. And I think actually another good player here for what we're kind of talking about and how the body types are different, Fred Warner is 6'3", 230. And so he is what the modern linebacker looks like. But if he came out 20 years ago, he might be closer to 6'3", 245, just because of what they were asking him to be at that position.
Yeah, Urlacher was 258 at the combine.
Jesus Christ.
And he ran a 4.59 at 258.
They just don't make a lot of those guys. They just don't make a lot of those guys.
And that's why, like, I want to get that across as we're having this discussion. It's like, he's an all-time freak. He absolutely could still play linebacker in the modern NFL if he, like, changed his body to fit the modern game in a more intentional way than he would have 20 years ago. But I think in a lot of ways, Brian Urlacher would be an incredible off-ball linebacker in today's NFL if you asked him to do all the things he could do back then.
100%. He would be absolutely lights out.
That's one. The end of the Brian Urlacher, the last bad mailbag we did, like what breakups or what like players moving on were tough for you. The end of the Brian Urlacher era was definitely that was a sad moment. Those were fun years when he was playing at his best. The year where he broke his wrist was horrible. It was devastating. It was just like, this sucks. So he was definitely one where it was tough when that guy moved on. Next one here from Andrew Bear said, in recent years, draft coverage has been more open about acknowledging uncertainty around prospect evaluation and how that uncertainty should affect both the ways teams approach the draft and how analysts should view draft classes. Should we adopt a similar intellectual humility when it comes to evaluating unproven head coaching hires? A lot of genuinely outstanding coordinators have taken the big chair and flopped comprehensively, but we still see, say, universal praise for the Ravens knocking it out of the park by hiring Jesse Minter, even though at this time last year, a lot of very smart, very reasonable people were praising Aaron Glenn as a brilliant defensive mind and charismatic leader of men. I have nothing against Minter, but when it comes to first-time head coaches, shouldn't we be more willing to say, who the heck knows?
So I want to start by saying, I think that approach to draft coverage sucks. Because it's not our job to draft the players. I think from the team's perspective, that is how they should operate. They should be a little bit more heavy on like consensus boards and really making sure that you have enough bites at the apple and all that stuff and whatever you want to say. But like our job is to be entertaining and like to have takes on these players and like really stand on stuff. So I hate that in terms of draft coverage. What I will say about how this spins forward to the coaches, I still think that we should be excited about certain coaches, right? Like I'm excited about Jesse Minter and Liam Cullen last year and all, some of these sorts of guys. I will say though, I think I am now a little bit more open to being surprised on coaching hires I didn't necessarily love. Like when Brian Schottenheimer is going to be the example. Like when he got promoted, I was like, man, what the is Dallas doing? Like this just doesn't seem like it's an inspiring hire. And then he surprises me, and that team is awesome. I think even Kellen Moore with the Saints last year, where I was just like, I don't know if I hate this, but this just kind of feels milquetoast, and I don't really know if this is going to do anything. And then it was like, by the end of the year, it was like, oh, their offense has kind of come together. They found new answers. The quarterback that they drafted has a little bit of something. And so I would still say if we want to be excited about certain coaches, that's important. And Robert, you've talked about like, when teams have these X factors, it's new coaches coming in that are a little bit uncertain. And so I still think it's important to value that a little bit. But I would say the lesson I've learned here is like, let yourself be surprised by some of the hires you don't necessarily love.
The answer to this, the idea of treating coaching hires with like, we really don't know, is we should do that. And I think I've been much more open to doing that recently. I think for me, the main lesson I learned, I think the most important lesson I learned over the last 5-6 years was the Brandon Staley thing, where it was like, even if I thought that those Rams defenses were really good, that Brandon Staley did a very good job with those Rams defenses, you just never know. And I think almost to a man, when these hires have happened, I do couch most of them with, I would do this if I was in this position. I don't know if it's going to work. Like this, all these they're a series of bets. And I think that we can talk about it in the terms of, this is the bet I would make. if I was in this position as a team hiring a head coach. And it's just not fun to say that every single time, right? But
that's the thing. We shouldn't have to like couch every single take that we have with like, well, we still don't know. It's like just say the thing you want to say.
And I think as long as we understand in the background that we don't
Right.
know who's going to be good and who's not, I'm more than willing to admit that. I think I say it often enough. Like, there's no way to know who's going. These jobs are so different. They have such different demands on them to a degree. And we can talk about that in a second. But I think overall, there's always a little bit of uncertainty. The Christian Parker thing is a good example of this. I have no idea if he's going to be a good defensive coordinator. He's never done it before. And moving from a passing game coordinator role, having a very siloed job within what your touch points are in the building, what your purview is every single day, the amount of people you manage. Like, there's so many different layers to this. Like, I've talked to a lot of coaches about this recently, and they've been really good discussions about what you do as an offensive coordinator beyond, like, after getting promoted from being a position coach, and just what changes. If you're the offensive line coach, you can sit there and close your door for 12 hours and just watch tape. Could draw up cool shit. That's your job.
What a life.
You can do that all day. If you're the offensive coordinator, you don't get to do that anymore. You got 12 people that you now manage. Think about your own job. Think about going from somebody who is just your scope every single day is just your work, getting it done, putting it on your manager's desk, you go home. And then think about being promoted into a managerial role where you're now managing a dozen people. They're vastly different jobs, even if some of the skill set carries over and you got promoted because you were good at one of the other ones. It's the same thing here, but I still think that there are certain elements we can attach ourselves to. Like Jesse Minter, again, this being a bet I would make. If you look at what Brandon Staley had with the Rams, and I probably wasn't receptive enough to this in the moment, you can do different stuff with Aaron Donald and Jalen Ramsey than you can do with almost any other defensive roster that's going to be out there. The roster that Jesse Minter has done this with for the Chargers, I think it's easier to talk yourself into that sort of multiplication effect and the maximization of your players translating over to another team because you weren't working with like hyper elite players at every single level of the defense when he was with the Chargers. And so again, I'm willing to talk myself into that being a bet that is worth making. And so I do think they're not all the same, but I absolutely think overall we should have some humility, uncertainty. I don't know if this is going to work hanging in the background, even if I think it would be boring to say that every single time you have a conversation about a coach or a choice, whatever.
I think that's mostly what it is like the presentation. I just don't think that there's a necessity for anybody to say that every single time we talk about things that are inherently uncertain, if that makes sense.
The last thing I want to say about this like him talking about Aaron Glenn being like a leader of men, and that's what we were excited about him as a head coach. I'm out on the leader of men stuff.
For anybody? Because that is more than anything the part of it we don't know. At least with like the scheme and play calling, like we can see that.
Boom.
Yeah.
I'm out. The idea that like this guy sounds like a head coach, he presents so well, he's so good in front of the room, all this shit. You need a certain level of presence and command to the job, undeniably, right? Like you need guys who are going to be willing to buy into what you're saying. That is important. But I just don't, we don't know. We don't know whether that's going to translate. Like Pete Carroll was supposed to be that. Like I just think that the world we're currently in, I need to see a direct impact you are having on how you're making your players better. And I think that right now, when you look at the way the league is, those are the bets that I think are easiest to make. And I think we're in a spot now. I was talking to a player about this last week. And I think I want to dig more into it because I think it's a really interesting idea. I think in the modern NFL, with these young players that have gotten paid to play football for a very long time, that have been professionals for a very long time, I think you have to be able to demonstrably show them with your coaching how you are going to make them better and make their jobs easier and allow them to make money. They respond to that. There is like a very tangible, practical thing. I think the idea of like, I'm going to go in here and I'm going to respect my coach because I'm supposed to respect my coach. I'm not sure that's happening quite as often as it would have when the dynamics between coaches and players were a little bit different than they are now. Right now, I think you have to come in and you have to create buy-in by creating confidence because you're making the players better and making their jobs easier. If you're not doing that, I think you're going to have a harder time being successful as an NFL head coach.
I 100% agree. Like, I think having a vision and simply finding a way to win games is going to solve like 90% of whatever your culture problems are going to be. Like, it really seems like it's that simple.
I think culture is confidence. Like, I don't think culture is fear. And I think that has changed.
Mhm.
I think that is like a dramatically different thing than it used to be. Like, I think the ways you're empowering players, what that feels like, what that sounds like, what that looks like, the back and forth, how much players have, what role they have in the process of like why they're doing what they're doing, the dialogue that exists between coaches and players. I just think that stuff is shifting, based on conversations I've had with people. And I think that will continue to shift. And so this idea of like, well, he seems like a leader of men. If we want to do that with guys like Jim Harbaugh or Mike Vrabel that are retreads that we've seen be successful doing that, I'm more open to that version of it. But these days, like, if you're not making a tangible difference in like why your team is better on the chalkboard or on Sunday, I have my doubts about it. I just am not sure we're playing in that world anymore. Next one here from Sam McBride. Looking back at the recent Super Bowl winners, they've pretty much all had rookies play an important role. For the Seahawks, Zabel helped stabilize the O-line, even worried allowed the defense to live in nickel. Before that, Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean fixed the Eagles' secondary. Rasheed Rice and Trent McDuffie played big roles in the Chiefs' back-to-back championships, and Wirfs and Winfield were both immediate contributors for the Bucs. I'm glad he mentioned Wirfs and Winfield in this. Mm-hmm. Looking at this year's draft, which guys do you think might have that sort of instant impact for a Super Bowl champion? In particular, are there any guys who you think could help lift a team not currently at the level to contending status if they hit? I had 3 teams and like 3 collections of players. One that to me was the most obvious.
I mean, to me, the one that stood out the most is like if Dallas, their first 2 guys hit, like Caleb Downs and Malachi Lawrence, if they're who you want, like that supercharges everything. The offense
that
is
the
really
clearest
good. That's
answer
the easiest
to me.
one.
That is the clearest answer.
That one's easy. I think another one I had was, we've seen the Ravens offense like vacillate depending on how good the offensive line is. If Vega Ioane is as good as we want him to be, like that solves so many issues for that team.
That was also on my short list. I had 4. Okay. Those were 2 of them.
Let's see if we get a third one. I think you could make the case that both of these players are necessary. Keylan Rutledge and Kayden McDonald for the Houston Texans. Like if they're as good as you, oh my god. Okay. It seems like this is the clear bucket of teams that are like almost true contenders, and like this would really get them over the top. That's funny. Who is your fourth one then? It is. They're the Chiefs guys. Rosters.
The Chiefs guys.
Yeah, I almost put them there too. Yeah, that's good.
Those to me are the clearest ones. Like Dallas, Kansas City, the Texans guys, and Vega Ioane. Those are the exact 4 examples that I had.
That is amazing that we literally landed in. I think the only reason I didn't end up putting the Chiefs guys is there were so many of them and they were all on defense that I was like, I'll just leave it to somebody else. That's really funny. That is really funny.
Yeah, I think those are the examples that really stuck out. And I think that Caleb Downs and Malachi Lawrence are the best representations of this. Mm-hmm. I actually think that in almost all of these scenarios, for the Bucs in 2020, and this is like a key, but I think a difference that's worth mentioning. With the Eagles in 2024, that was year 1 under Fangio. So it was not just the roster improvements. You had a new coordinator plus the roster improvements. But for the Chiefs with McDuffie, that was same Spags. You just needed an injection of talent. For the Bucs with Wirfs and Winfield, obviously Brady comes in. But if you look at the roster overall, I got receipts on this. I remember writing in the moment when they drafted those 2 guys, I was like, those are the last things they needed. They needed 1 tackle and 1 defensive playmaker in the secondary for this roster to look really, really good with Tom Brady. And then they won the Super Bowl that year. And so I think with Dallas, you're changing over the coordinator and you have these players. So I don't think the quality of the roster top to bottom for Dallas's defense is quite as good as like the Eagles were, the Chiefs were, the Bucs were, where like that one guy really made everything else come together. But when you combine it with a new defensive coordinator, potentially, I do think it has the potential to supercharge it in a notable way, even if you're still threading a needle a little bit.
And that is, I think if you're going to put it that way, I actually do think that's why the Houston guys feel like the most analogous to a scenario like that, where it's like that roster is not that far away. I don't feel like. And like, so if like Rutledge and McDonald are who they want in terms of beefing up that team, that could supercharge things, but we'll see.
Last one here from Jack Fidane. Says, people always talk about how Green Bay effectively redshirts their quarterback and O-lineman. What about receivers? Is a Matthew Golden year 2 breakout coming now that they cleared the depth chart in front of him? What do you think about this?
I actually do think that Matthew Golden can still be a really good player. I think people have gotten to a point with him, and really with young wide receivers at large, where if they are not immediately like a superstar, then we just don't care about them. And I do think in terms of like, if you are not immediately a superstar, you're not going to be an all-pro. I think that is probably true. But I think that you can sometimes have these guys where it takes a year or two to be a good player. And I think that Matthew Golden does have that in him. Like, I think there were some flashes towards the back half of the year. I think that he is a guy who I think he can win on a vertical plane pretty well. It's just that offense struggled to do that outside of some of their true play action stuff because the offensive line was not very good. Maybe that won't be the case this year, which is going to be, that's kind of a separate discussion. But I do think that Matthew Golden can be pretty solid for them.
I agree with you. I think on pretty much every single point. If you're not a breakout player immediately, you're probably never going to hit that top tier. I think more and more we're seeing receivers come in, and if you can't break into the starting lineup, it is something to be worried about. It's funny that for this team specifically, this is the team where there are plenty of examples of guys not immediately being stars and then becoming really, really good players. Jordy Nelson, in his first year, had 33 catches. Okay. Matthew Golden had 29. In his rookie year, Davante Adams had 38 catches. And then we remember what happened with Jordy Nelson and Davante Adams. So this is, to me, probably the best example of a team and a franchise that has consistently shown an ability to develop guys a little bit later in their careers at this position.
Well, and even not up to that level, like Romeo Doubs and Christian Watson were not like the hottest starters. Like it took them a couple of years to really like find their level a little bit more in the NFL. And so I think that could totally happen for him. Like this is a guy where I would feel okay with him kind of having a decent career here.
Yeah, I'm not one to give up on Matthew Golden yet. I know that the recent trend is like these guys hit immediately, but I'm not willing to give up on Matthew Golden quite yet.
Yeah. And again, I think that like you can probably give up on him being an all-pro, but there are he could be wide receiver 17 in the NFL, and that's still a really good player, even if he's not an all-pro. I don't know if he's going to be that good, but that's kind of the point that I'm trying to make.
Yeah, I was trying to look at some other guys that maybe have had quieter rookie years than I thought, but it's just a unique scenario where Christian Watson coming back and being as good as Christian Watson was, along with Romeo Doubs taking that step forward. Like I think about the Matthew Golden thing, and maybe this is giving him a little bit too much grace, but when we talked about why the Broncos, when we talked about why the Packers needed Matthew Golden last year, it was that they needed a guy in that receiving core when it was 3rd and 7 and teams are playing man coverage against you. Do you have somebody that can be a winner in those scenarios? I think that's why they drafted Matthew Golden. The thing is, Romeo Doubs became that player. Like he filled that role and he was that guy within the offense. And so you have him, you have Christian Watson, you have Jaden Reed, guys that all play like very specific roles within the offensive environment that you have built. And so even if Matthew Golden can potentially be a good player, he didn't fill any of those roles last year any better than the guys that you already had. And so I think you can explain away how we got to this place with Matthew Golden, even if his rookie year was very disappointing compared to other first-round picks recently.
Yeah, it was like disappointing in terms of production, but like and this to me is not a situation where it was like Quentin Johnston in his rookie year, where it was like not necessarily a loaded receiver group and he was struggling a little bit to get on the field and you had all the like really obvious drop issues. To me with Golden, it was just like they had 4 or 5 good pass catchers already. And I think that this is a team that is always drafting ahead and clearly decided that they wanted to do that here. And that's okay.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's absolutely a world where Matthew Golden has a really nice second season. All right. That is all we've got for today. Sincerely appreciate everybody listening. We'll actually be back Wednesday this week. When you guys are listening to this, I'll just be getting back from vacation. We're still going to have 4 shows this week, but it's going to be Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday instead of our normal Monday through Thursday schedule. So just be on the lookout for that. But starting a week from now, we are back to Monday through Thursday, 4 shows a week. Very excited to be back. Appreciate everyone who sent in the questions. For now, that's all we got. Appreciate you guys listening. We'll talk to you very soon. Thanks for watching. Follow The Athletic Football Show wherever you get your podcasts. And don't forget to subscribe on YouTube.